Kia ora, Year 13s, Ms. Mac again. I thought I'd just go a bit crazy. So I've done some drawing again, you can see. I kind of enjoyed this actually, playing with colours. Again, I'm not the best with the old drawing and the old pen on the laptop here, but hopefully I can go through this just to help you understand this concept of externalities. And in particular, this one is going to be a negative externality of production. So you might remember me telling you about the Radium Girls. It's a book that's in the library, and I feel like there's definitely like a movie, there's like actually even a play, it might be on Netflix, I'm not sure, maybe Google it, Radium Girls. Really good book, totally recommend reading it. So crunch of it all is that back in, like, I feel like it was the 1920s, kind of around about that time, they used to have like factories in the US where they painted watches for like pilots who flew planes, obviously, and they needed watches that kind of, I guess, would glow in the dark a little bit, that I could read them. I don't know, I can't remember the full story, but yeah, basically they were painting these watches for like pilots and I guess other people who needed to have like fluorescent watches or something. But here's the crutch of it all, they're painting it with radium, and I feel like I didn't do very well in sixth form chemistry, but yeah, that's kind of dangerous. You shouldn't really be touching that stuff, right? Yeah, so they had paint that was made from radium, and the whole thing is that to, you know, it's quite, a watch is quite difficult to paint, like it's like really small and you've got to paint like really finely. So the women had to like point their brushes so that they could paint the numbers. And so how they did it is they would dip their brushes in the water, and then they would stick it in their mouth to point the end, and then they'd stick it in the paint, and then they'd paint in the watch, and then they'd stick it in the water, and then stick it in their mouth. So they're basically putting radium into their mouths. And I feel like, again, you don't need to do any chemistry or science. Well, maybe you do need to do a bit of science, but hopefully we can see this is not a very good thing to be doing. And so unsurprisingly, what happened is that a lot of these women got really, really sick, like died, all right, but not before like suffering horrific, like, what would you call it, internal injuries, and like their mouth like falling apart, or their teeth like rotting and falling out, you know, horrific stuff. And I, you know, probably, I can't remember, but probably they passed on like some illnesses to their children and stuff like that. And like, you know, this is America, so they had to pay for all that themselves. The kids lost their mothers, like women weren't able to work and all that. So horrific stuff, like really horrific, but a great read. So I really do encourage you, if you're bored, go to the library and get it out. So let's just go back to sort of 1920 USA, and let's, you know, maybe they didn't realize, you know, the factories that produce these watches and the bosses, like maybe they really didn't understand the whole concept that radium might be dangerous. Let's pretend that they didn't get any research given to them or any reports that kind of pointed out that this is a really not a good idea. Yeah. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. So you have the private market. This is like the price of the watches, and that should, for the producers or the firms here involved, account for all the marginal cost of producing each watch, right? I can't speak properly. So it's basically for them, they're thinking about the cost, they're thinking about their profits. And I didn't put it on here, but this will be their PS, all right? So they're thinking about maximizing their producer surplus, and the consumers are, I guess, the Navy, the military, will be thinking about the benefits to them of having these beautiful painted watches. And they're happy for that price because it maximizes their consumer surplus. And we have a happy E, everything's beautiful. You know, you've got all the costs and benefits for this watch accounted for in this market, except for, oh yeah, all those stories about those women getting sick and dying starts to leak out, and, you know, people start doing reports and research and stuff, and they ignore it a lot, and they keep on ignoring it, but eventually like it comes out and like it's horrific. People are like really upset about it. And, you know, basically what's happened is there's a lot of costs incurred onto society, like American society, and particularly the families of these women. It's kind of a little bit murky because they are kind of a participant because they work in the market, but think about like their family who don't actually work in the factories or anything, but they're now affected. And, you know, like some of them are talking about, some of the women were actually so radioactive that, you know, you could actually get sick from being near like the coffin and the bones and stuff. I may be making this up a bit, but I feel like read the book. Like it's wider than just the woman. It definitely was the people around them and their families that were affected. So this is actually like a radiation symbol. It's not very good, but it's yellow with black. I googled it. Yeah, these are like women that are dead. RIP. Yeah. Hope you can see the picture I was trying to build here. All right. So eventually, like, these guys had to listen. You know, the government was like, what are you doing? All right, enough people got angry about it, newspapers, etc., publicized it, that they're kind of like, whoa, this is not good. This is not right. All right, this is what you're doing privately. We're not, you know, they're very anti-government intervention in the US. All right, so they kind of left it alone, but then people are like, nah, this is actually what's happening. So follow my arrow. This is like the social, including society. So including these poor women's families into the benefits and costs in the market, right? So once we do that, we need to put the society into the MC or the MB curve. We need to think about, what about these spillover costs, you know, they're spilling over into the market. So let's pop over here. Let's say it's about 1950 when they kind of, you know, finally realized, or, you know, the truth was really out there. So here's your private market equilibrium, kind of like what's happening here. All right, oh, we're fine, everything's good. But it's not really, because actually, once you account for these spillover costs, we have to add them on to our marginal cost curve. We have to go, you think that's the cost? No, 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 no. This is the cost. It's actually way higher. So one thing I'll just point out to you is that that's like the private market price, which is like the cost of, say, producing these watches and the benefit that consumers get from it. This is actually the real cost, okay? Much, much higher, because it includes those spillover costs that are occurring at QM. Okay, so I haven't drawn anything over here, but this is actually like what it would really be costing once you account for these spillover costs. Okay, I'm just going to pause here. Sorry people, I just had a momentary call coming through, so I'll come back to them. So where was I? All right, so this is the real cost, and this is what the private market is charging. So straight away, can we not see that this is too low? You're not actually accounting for all the costs involved, particularly of these horrific illnesses these women are suffering, the costs that they're incurring, the costs that their families are incurring because they'll have to pay it, all right, and the cost to society of lost like productivity, lost hours. And actually, you know, who's going to pick up the tab if they can't pay? Society does. So there are huge spillover costs here, and that's why MEC does not equal MC. But no, there's nothing wrong with actually, when you consume these watches, it doesn't do any danger, I don't believe. Like, you just stick the watch on and you can read it like fairly safe, should be fine, right? So there isn't really, like, I mean, maybe you could take that somewhere. I'm not going to. There's nothing involved really particularly wrong with the consumption of the good. All right, the issue is with when you produce these watches, you are incurring these spillover costs that I've shown over here. Oh, and I just realized I haven't moved this over, so let me move this over. Now you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so what I'm talking about here is that here's your MC, PM, QM. I was talking it through before, but you couldn't see it. All right, and here is actually the true cost to society. This is actually what the price should be at PM, QM. So at the private equilibrium, that really should be what the price is. All right, but the problem is if you whacked up the price, then obviously the demand side of it, the pilot stuff, are going to want to wear the watches. So MSC doesn't equal MC. It's not a consumption issue. The issue is with production. All right, that's where the spillover costs incur. So we show MC much higher because MC is MC plus, in this case, spillover costs. Okay, so yep, that's what the price realistically should be at QM. But let's just hold on. Let's go and just, this is all a bit theoretical. If we want to find the social equilibrium, we need to find where MSB equals MSC, which is here, right? So kind of what it's saying is that theoretically, society would actually tolerate a certain amount of like radiation poisoning for women, and they would prefer some production of these watches, but a much lower quantity, all right? So this is theoretically, I think in the real world, we can say they wouldn't want anything produced, but just according to this model, what we're saying is that the private production of these watches is too high at QM. Society would prefer less at QS, which is where MSC, the marginal social cost, is equal to the marginal social benefit. All right, society would also prefer that the prices are way higher to reflect all the costs involved in this transaction. Because society's wishes are not being met at the private equilibrium, there's this dead weight loss, which is this rather beautiful kind of mix of colours, this kaleidoscope of colours here. This is your dead weight loss because of that idea that society's preference of a lower quantity produced are not being met and the good is overproduced at QM. You kind of know I'm repeating certain phrases. Overproduced at QM. Overproduced at QM because the marginal social benefit, which is here, is less than the marginal social cost. Society would prefer that we decrease production of these watches, and as we decrease the watches, the marginal social benefit will decrease. I'm kind of like, and the marginal social benefit will increase. Terrible, Ms. McIntosh. And the marginal social cost will decrease until it is equal at PSQS. And that's basically what it's saying, is that there's like an optimal level of like pollution, or like in this case radiation costs, the society is willing to tolerate. This is theoretical. Let's be realistic. In the real world with these watches, we don't want any. But what we're saying with a negative externality is where the MSB curve equals the MSC curve is the social equilibrium. And in this case, for negative externality of production, society would prefer a lower quantity and at a higher price. Because these spillover costs are not being accounted for at PMQM. All right, society has uncaptured spillover costs, and that's why there's a dead weight loss. The sparkly kind of, well, it's not sparkly, it's kind of like a multicolored, or I don't know, mix here. Okay, so the dead weight loss is probably the tricky thing to explain here. Why it's market failure is not hard, but think about the dead weight loss. Think about MSC being higher than MSB. Think about society preferring productions decrease until it equals where MSC equals MSB, and because the free market will not operate at PSQS and instead will operate at PMQM, there's that dead weight loss here that represents the uncaptured spillover costs at QM/PM. So I'm going to sign off for tonight. I hope you enjoyed my really wonderful diagrams here. I'm just going to move it around so you can see the gorgeousness that it is. Yeah, I was maybe a little bit bored and had a wee bit of fun. So I hope you find this helpful, and I hope you enjoy this topic. It's quite interesting, a little bit hard in places, but definitely interesting. Ka kite.